Today, I'm going to be breaking down one of the Blues' newest additions, Mathieu Joseph. I'll be going into his player profile, what he's going to add to the team this year, his cap hit, all of that and more. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to this mini series in the off season. If you're watching on YouTube, it's appreciated if you give us a like and subscribe, or listening audio only if you give us a 5-star rating and share this episode with anyone you think might be interested. So, Mathieu Joseph is the newest forward of the St. Louis Blues. They've had a very active offseason, especially in the defensive department so far, and there's probably more on the way. But our newest forward addition comes from Ottawa. So, Mathieu Joseph is 27 years old. He is 6'1", 190 pounds, and the Blues acquired him from Ottawa in addition to their third-round pick next year, which is a significant part of this trade. The return Ottawa received was future considerations. Again, a theme is developing this year. But that will all be settled, I suppose, in the future. So it's hard to say if the Blues gave up too much because we don't know what they've given up yet. So who is Mathieu Joseph? As I said, he's a forward. He is going to be a winger. He doesn't quite have the size to play center. He could, but really poor on the faceoff and is more of a winger. And that's definitely where he profiles to be best. Next year, his cap hit will be $2.95 million, and his deal goes until the following season, 2025-26, where he'll become a UFA after that deal. So Joseph is under contract for the next 2 years, both of them at $2.95 million, which is, again, similarly with the Radek Faksa trade, it's a little bit higher than you'd probably want for a depth player who doesn't have as much of a track record, especially as Faksa, but it certainly does not limit the team in any way in their ability to make moves and whatnot. Additionally, it really isn't all that high. It'll be one of the lower earners. The only ones under them will be like the AHL call-ups and whatnot, who are not even making $1 million yet. So certainly nothing that the Blues can't handle and even offload if it comes to it. So the last 4 years he's played entirely in the NHL. Before that, he was kind of up and down. He's drafted in the 4th round by the Tampa Bay Lightning. And in the last 4 years, these are his stats. So in 2020, 2021, played 56 games, put up 19 points. Not a ton there. In 2021-22, he played half of the season, most of the season, I guess, on the Lightning, and then was traded to the Senators at the deadline, but only played 11 games for them. So, and 58 games for the Lightning that season, put up 18 points, then was traded to the Senators, put up in 11 games, he put up 12 points, which gives him a total of, in 69 games, 30 points, which is an okay mark, I suppose, for a depth winger. The next season, in 2022-23, he put up 18 points in 56 games, so a much lower mark, and perhaps saw a little bit of regression. But last season sort of came back to relevance. He had 35 points in 72 games, so playing almost a full season. Only 11 goals, but 24 assists, putting up some production as a depth winger. Really not bad for his position. However, on Ottawa, he was not a depth winger. So partially because of his play or partially because of just their team, there was not a lot of good on the Ottawa Senators last season, and he was playing second line minutes. For the Blues, he will certainly play more of a third line role. Potentially some games, I'm sure we'll see him on the second line, depending on how Bannister wants to shake things up and how whoever's sort of hot compared to the rest of the team. But most likely he'll play third line, maybe some fourth line, which is a lot better of a prospect for both the Blues and for him as a player. So those point values don't really jump off the page, but I do want to point out a little bit of a perhaps promising trend that the Blues can build off of. So his first season put up, as I said, 19 points in 56 games. Next season put up 30 in 69 games, which are okay. Really regressed in 22-23, only putting up 18 points. But then he sort of bounced back and got to that 35-point mark in a little 10 games under the full season. So there is a little bit of a positive trend here. Definitely was going pretty well until that 2022-23 season, where he didn't even play the full season, so he did deal with some injuries there. So there is some room for improvement here, and he has shown the ability to make that improvement. As I said, he's 27 years old, so for most prospects, you maybe think there isn't a ton of developing, and maybe that is the case. Maybe he will just be around mid 30s, which in points, which is okay for a third liner. But you could potentially see a little bit more out of him if he can get to that 40-point mark. He's definitely doing something right on the Blues. Additionally, the biggest mark of his game potentially is also his defense. So when we broke down Faxa, there was a lot to get really excited about for his defense. Joseph's analytics are mixed, but a lot of people do comment on his defensive play being active and trying. It isn't the greatest stat, but it does show something, I suppose. So his plus minus over that span. His first full season, he was at a +3. The next, a +4. The next, he was at a +13. Then in that down season, he actually had a +5 still. So always positive defensively. That is until last year, where he had a -4. So still not even that negative. And again, the Ottawa Senators were a very bad team with a very bad goal differential last year. Hard to put up good numbers defensively on anybody as anybody in that situation. So he should profile as a fine enough defensively winger, I would think, who again kind of does enough offensively as well. Just an overall solid player, and these are the types of players that can really help push the depth of a team more so than when if you want to compete or have a successful season, you do need role players such as Joseph to fill their roles well. So again, another part of his game that is hard to quantify, but certainly does show up is his ability on special teams and even generating special teams. So longtime Blues fans, I'm sure, will be very aware. One of the greatest strengths of Vladimir Tarasenko's toolkit, especially in his prime, was he was a master at drawing penalties. And Joseph profiles should be similar in terms of his ability drawing penalties. So following top down hockey's model again, he was a plus penalty killer on special teams minutes and very very good at drawing those penalties. They gave him a slightly positive mark. Again, those teams did not have a lot going on, but he was far and away the highest for wingers around his minutes time. It's at a .11 for them, which most of their statistics are just plus or minus .1. So being slightly better than .1 is a above average at drawing penalties, and doesn't take a ton of penalties as well. Except last season, he did surrender the most penalty minutes of his career at 51. Before that, it was decently low at 10, 29, and 36 respectively. So perhaps you would like to see that discipline sort of regress back to a lower level. And if he can provide by drawing a lot of penalties too, that could really help. We've seen a lot of additions to our special teams so far, even in the few additions that we have had, with Faxa being a plus penalty killer and Joseph being a plus penalty killer. I guess the only other thing to say about his game is that his statistics are kind of fine. They're okay. And his analytics are pretty mixed, but mostly like him. When there was, again, a lot of bad about that Ottawa team last year, his aren't horrible. So, it isn't the most exciting outlook, but it is something you can hang your hat on as potential for having growth. And even if he slots in as he played sort of the last couple seasons, then he'll be an okay piece, probably making a little bit too much money for his value, but again, nothing that you can't get off of. And the other part of this deal is the Blues got a third round pick in addition to Joseph. So at the end of the day, acquiring a third round pick is at least something that you can flip, or that we've seen, especially with this last year's draft, they're really good at finding value in those middle rounds. So there is at least an upside of this deal, even disregarding Joseph's play on the ice next season and potentially the season following. One more thing that I think is interesting about Matthew Joseph's profile is his ability as a shooter. He, as a winger, had a very high shooting percentage for a lot of his career in Tampa, but as soon as he went to Ottawa, that went down significantly. Looking at that same span of years, so his first full season in the NHL in 2020 and 2021, he had a 20.3 shooting percentage on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, obviously, the Lightning were a very good team. They were scoring a lot. They also weren't surrendering a lot of goals. So even depth wingers will sort of step out in a way, but a 20.3 shooting percentage is a very high mark. That is something that most depth wingers on good teams don't even get to. The following season, 2021-22, the Lightning were still a great team again. But again, I think this is more so a credit to Joseph's profile rather than the Lightning's team. He had a 14 flat shooting percentage. So pretty high for a depth winger. He likes to fire pucks at the nets, and that's kind of how we saw those offensive numbers jump up for him. And that's a very easy coaching change to make, because when he went to Ottawa, those numbers plummeted. So his first full season in Ottawa, 22-23, he had a 4.5 shooting percentage, and that was easily the worst season of his career. So again, that is a very easy coaching decision that Bannister and the Blues coaching staff can adjust to. And then the following season, he had an 8.9 shooting percentage, which is not remarkable, is not particularly good, though he did have good production on that shooting percentage, even as it is low. And this is why I'm saying his stats are kind of fine and show a lot of room for growth that could be really exciting as a depth winger. Usually you don't really expect much out of your third and fourth line wingers. And I think Joseph could really provide both on special teams, on the penalty kill, on drawing penalties and getting that man advantage for the Blues that hopefully they will improve their game last year. And then finally, if he can get more of an aggressive offensive profile, go back to what he had in his years with the Lightning, I think this could be a really favorable move for the Blues that really shouldn't hurt them in any way, because at the bare minimum, there's that third round pick that they can either flip or select with next year. Next year's draft has a lot of really exciting depth talent. So I would say there's a lot to like about this move. And while we don't know the return yet, it's hard to imagine that it will end up being an overpay. So there is a lot to be excited about for Mathieu Joseph. And he'll be playing with his brother, which we'll be covering in the next this mini series of recap of the Blues offseason moves. But let us know what you think. Reach out to us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram. As I said, it's much appreciated if you like and subscribe on YouTube. Give us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us out. And if you want to share this mini series with all who can, that would also help our growth and help us prepare for the off season as we can talk more Blues. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode. And as always, until next time, let's go Blues.